Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to remember the great musical legacy of John Wetton, who died on this day in 2017, feels like yesterday. Now, John Wetton was sort of omnipresent in what most would call, the progressive rock scene. His early days were spent in a sort of jazzy prog band called Mogul Thrash. They never made it big. He did some really interesting work with a band called Family, who had a cult following and were really good. Check out the album Fearless by Family. I think it's their best album. It's on all of the streaming services and it features John Wetton. Pardon me. But he became known to the world when he joined the what I would call the second great lineup of King Crimson. There was the original lineup, then there were two lineups that produced such good music, but that sort of floated under the radar a bit. Then there was the lineup featuring Wetton and Bill Bruford and David Cross on violin, and for a while an eccentric percussionist of all sorts called Jamie Muir. And this was a band that was, in many ways, of all the 70s versions of King Crimson, the hardest working, the one that toured the most. And Wetton in that band proved that he was such an innovative and interesting bass player, and that as a band that was getting further and further into improvisation and dissonance and a harder, more metallic sound, his very powerful yet very beautiful voice was sort of something that let everyone know, okay, we might be getting out there, but this wonderful voice is sort of going to keep us on track. And I think that that yin yang effect really helped make that version of King Crimson both innovative and accessible. Again, this balance, this yin and yang. When that King Crimson suddenly broke up because the always eccentric Robert Fripp thought the world was coming to an end, he did a lot of work, session work essentially with other bands, including Roxy Music. He even appeared on Uriah Heep's High and Mighty album, sung a song on it, a really good album. And then he formed what many call one of the coolest, most interesting, and best bands in prog rock. And this is, of course, the band UK. Now, the original lineup was a supergroup, a prog rock supergroup. There was John Wetton on bass and vocals, and there was Eddie Jobson on keyboards and violins. He had been with Roxy Music as well, also Frank Zappa, so there's the pedigree there. On drums, Bill Bruford, everyone's favorite prog drummer, and of course, Alan Holdsworth, Eddie Van Halen, and Frank Zappa's favorite guitarist. What could go wrong? Nothing. It was perfect. The lone album that lineup created was really, in many ways, that perfect blend of prog and jazz fusion. It had a kind of interesting transatlantic feel without really pandering to the more rocky side in Europe, nor pandering to the more jazzy side in the US. It was really just a well balanced, virtuosic album, but it broke up, and as Wetton described later, he and Jobson wanted to go more in a sort of pop direction. They wanted to produce rock music that was virtuosic and artistically intriguing, but that had a sort of beginning, middle, and end, a melody. And a lot of people in the prog world said, oh, why would you want to throw away this great band to do that? Well, good songwriting is not easy. And I believe that for all of John Wetton's many talents, the thing that I remember him most for is his excellent songwriting. Now, some of that came out on the second UK album. Well, it came out on the first, frankly. But again, the second album was still very proggy, even though you lost Holdsworth and it became a more sort of tight unit. But really, where the world got to know, hey, this guy can write a memorable pop song while keeping it virtuosic. That was with the band formed in the early 80s, Asia. Yet another supergroup. There was Wetton, who was one of the two main songwriters on bass and vocals. There was Jeff Downes, formerly of Yes and the Buggles, the other main songwriter on keys. Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer on drums, and the great virtuoso Steve Howe of Yes on guitar. And it was in that band that Wetton really showed that This was sort of the great secret of John Wetton that had been sort of hiding under the covers, if you will, for the 10 years before. They all knew he was versatile, reliable, and very talented. But with Aisha, you really got to see what he loved doing most, which is to write great songs. And he would continue to do that on solo albums, on other collaborations outside of Aisha with Jeff Downes. He never retreated from his proggy side. He played a lot with people like Steve Hackett, who became more rather than less progressive after they left the band with whom they were associated. So his bass chops never failed him, but he really was someone who, in the world of prog, you can think of him as the one man Tin Pan Alley in that progressive rock pantheon. Of his many talents, that's what I remember him most for. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.